I'm Cindy Gallop. I'm the founder and CEO of Make Love Not Porn. We are pro-sex, pro-porn, pro-knowing the difference. We're the world's first and only user-generated, 100% human-curated social sex video sharing platform. So the way to think about us is, if porn is the Hollywood blockbuster movie, Make Love Not Porn is the badly needed documentary. We're a unique window onto the funny, messy, loving, wonderful sex we all have in the real world. And what we're doing is we're socializing, normalizing, and destigmatizing sex, bringing it out of the shadows into the sunlight to promote consent, communication, good sexual values and behavior. We are literally sex education through real world demonstration.
That kind of sounds like a little bit too what Life in Red is all about. Is, obviously we are owned by Live Jasmin, which is a cam site. But what part of what inspired this project was wanting to put out factual information that's either from researchers or experts or people that have real life experience in the industry and in the field. I think a lot of people that are not part of the industry at all seem to have some of the loudest voices out there. So we wanted to help give the industry a voice. I'm curious, what inspired this project for you?
Sure. So Make Love Not Porn was a complete and total accident because I never consciously, intentionally set out to do anything I very bizarrely find myself doing now. It came about because I date younger men. They tend to be in their 20s. And about 16 years ago now, I began realizing through dating younger men that I was encountering very personally and directly what happens when two things converge. And I stress the dual convergence because most people think it's only one thing. I realized that I was experiencing what happens when today's total freedom of access to hardcore porn online meets our society's equally total reluctance to talk openly and honestly about sex. When those two factors converge, porn becomes sex education by default in not a good way. So I found myself encountering a number of sexual behavioral memes in bed. I went, whoa, I know where that behavior is coming from. I thought, gosh, if I'm experiencing this, other people must be as well. I didn't know that because 15, 16 years ago, no one was talking about this. No one's writing about it. This was me as a naturally action-oriented person going, I'm going to do something about this. So nearly 15 years ago now, I put up on no money a tiny clunky website at MakeLoveNotPorn.com that in its original version was just words. The construct was porn world versus real world. Here's what happens in the porn world. Here's what really happens in the real world. I launched Make Love Not Porn at the TED conference in 2009. I became the only TED speaker to say the words, "come on my face" on the TED stage 6 times in succession. The talk went viral as a result, and it drove this extraordinary global response to my tiny website that I had never anticipated. Thousands of people wrote to me from every country in the world, young and old, male and female, straight and gay, pouring their hearts out, telling me things about their sex lives and their porn watching habits they'd never told anybody else before. And I realized I'd uncovered a huge global social issue. And so that's what inspired me to turn Make Love Not Porn into what it is today, a business designed to do good and make money simultaneously.
Fascinating. I love that. So to make sure I'm understanding correctly, you were basically realizing in your personal experience that partners were almost trained in a way to perform or carry out certain acts that are so clearly part of the porn world.
Do you know, this is the important thing. It's not about the acts, okay? Because what I always tell people is that everything you see in porn, somebody somewhere loves doing. In fact, millions of somebodies. It's much more about the belief that that is what real world sex is. And so one of the things that, I explain to people is, so post my TED talk, I frequently get the response of, oh, Cindy, so you don't like people coming on your face? And my response is, it all depends who's doing the coming. Because the point, and actually we have the original slides from the original MakeLoveNotPorn.com site on our homepage at MakeLoveNotPorn.tv, where you can see all the porn world versus real world. And, the whole point was, don't just assume because you've seen this in porn that it's what someone's going to love in the real world. Communicate, check first. Some people love this, some people don't. Some people like this, other people, don't like it. So it's much more about, real world sex is different with every sexual partner you'll ever have. There is no formula. You don't break out the porn moves and everyone's suddenly delighted. Combined with rather more subtle things, if you like. So, I'm very open about the fact that I date younger men casually and recreationally. I date a lot of them. But I'm extremely selective about whom I date. No matter how casual the relationship, I've one fundamental criterion. They have to be a very nice person. I have amazing radar for very nice people. As a result, I only date utterly lovely younger men in an atmosphere of mutual trust, respect, affection, liking, and still, I will, in bed with one of those lovely younger men, see him modeling the body language that says, my dick is the center of the universe. And it's all about me. And it's all about whether I get to come. And by the way, again, this is an utterly lovely young man, but he's grown up watching male lens mainstream porn made for men that tells him he's internalized in a way he doesn't even realize that sex is all about him. His pleasure is the be-all and the end-all. Obviously, that's not good.
Wow. Your perspective is really, really fascinating. And it's really valuable. Like I actually really admire what you've done and what you've built and putting your voice out there to kind of almost not necessarily intentionally, but in some ways kind of combat some of these mainstream ideals or ideas that you were able to see were influencing the way that people were having sex, and maybe not misguiding, but leading people to think that this is how it's supposed to be or how it should be. You said something that really struck a bell on our end, being from Live Jasmin, which is about the communication. Because you're right, sometimes people just, jump into engagements with other people and just assume it should happen this way or that way. And they're lacking that communication, which really is connecting. And at this point, I think I've interviewed truly hundreds of models and members from Live Jasmin. And in that dynamic, using that as an example, in order for a member to get what they're wanting, they have to communicate it explicitly. And at the same time, models are human beings too. And they're not just going to say, okay, yes, to something that they're uncomfortable with. And so there's almost like a negotiation to some degree that takes place. I totally get that you're into that, but I only do this. And is that okay with you? And I've found that these relationships last 15 years. I've interviewed members that have the same relationship with the same model for 15, 18 years. And I think what's bonding them is that explicit communication and understanding where the other person is coming from.
No, you're absolutely right. Obviously in your context, there's a different goal in that communication from what we show on Make Love Not Porn, which is real world sex. Because, in the case of Live Jasmin, as you say, a member has something they're looking for, and it's based on negotiation with a model, but ultimately the model is going to give them as much of that as she or he, or they can. And in our case, what we're doing at Make Love Not Porn is we are simply holding a mirror up to how the world really has sex. We are literally answering the question that everybody has asked since the dawn of time, which is, what is everybody else really doing in bed? And until Make Love Not Porn came along, nobody knew. And what's interesting about that is, you are seeing really powerful interactions, because what we celebrate is real world emotion, love, intimacy, feelings. And the reason that's so important is because all around us in popular culture, movies, TV, Netflix, we see many creative expressions and narratives of relationships, but we never see the actual sex. On Make Love Not Porn, you see the actual sex, but you also see the relationships. Because in our videos, those two things are indivisible. And when I say that, I don't just mean that in our many partnered, threesomed, coupled videos, you see what healthy relationship dynamics look like during sex. In our many solo videos, because we have a ton of masturbation videos, male, female, trans, non-binary, in those videos, you see what it's like to have a healthy relationship with yourself, with your own body, your own genitals, your own sexuality. And I'll tell you what has been something of a revelation to us at Make Love Not Porn is, I designed Make Love Not Porn to be fully diverse and inclusive, and we are. Our members and our Make Love Not Porn stars, our contributors, range in age from 18 to 80, literally. They are, as I said, male, female, trans, non-binary, straight, LGBTQ, all races, ethnicities, etc. I mean, we have asexual Make Love Not Porn stars. But in the now 11 years that we've been operating, we've observed that Make Love Not Porn is especially a revelation to men. More men send us grateful emails, leave appreciative comments than anybody else, because we are something utterly unique that men will find nowhere else on the internet, which is a safe space where men can be and watch other men being open, emotional, and vulnerable around sex. You wouldn't believe the number of men who write to us regularly and say, I just watched my first video, Make Love Not Porn, and afterwards I cried. I've said for years, I wish society understood the opposite of what it thinks is true. Women enjoy sex just as much as men, and men are just as romantic as women. Yet neither gender is allowed to openly celebrate either fact. We'd all be better off if they were. I picked up a wonderful exchange on Twitter last year between two men. The first man who tweeted, this is obviously a joke, by the way, he tweeted, hey guys, I've got this really weird fetish. I've got this kink where I want to watch porn, where people are honest, loving, loyal, decent, and really like each other. Hit me up with your hottest links, please. And another man replied and said, there's this website called Make Love Not Porn, where you can watch real couples fucking and making love. He said, I watched a video where the woman said to her man, I love you, while they're making love. He said, sincerely, I cried when I heard that. We are one of these solutions to toxic masculinity. We are 100% user-generated. We are a platform where anybody is welcome to publish their real-world sex videos. So nobody is actively performing, nobody's creating. They are simply submitting videos of the actual sex they have in the real world. And we operate, in order to ensure that, we operate not only unlike anybody else in the adult sphere, but unlike anybody else on the internet, period. And that's because I designed Make Love Not Porn through the female lens to be the safest place on the internet. That's because I designed it around what everybody else should have, nobody else did, human curation. There is no self-publishing of anything on Make Love Not Porn. Our curators watch every frame of every video submitted from beginning to end before we approve or reject, and we publish it. No one else does that. And by the way, our only criteria are, is this real, is this consensual? Otherwise, anything goes. We exist to celebrate the full glorious spectrum of human sexuality. But also, beyond that, our curators review every post on every member profile, photos, text, illustration. And by the way, on Make Love Not Porn, your posts can be as safe work or not safe work as you like, but we review them, we approve or reject, and we publish them. Nobody else does that. We review every comment on every video. before we approve or reject and publish it. No one else does that. We can vouch for every single piece of content on our platform in a way that nobody else can. And by the way, we're tiny bootstrapping, we have no money, and we've human curated everything for 11 years. Imagine what Facebook, YouTube, Instagram could do with their billions if they chose to. Safety on the internet is not a matter of viability, it's a matter of will. And by the way, we take human curation to lengths way beyond what anybody else has even dreamt of. So it's not actually possible to even complete our submissions process unless your video is fully consensual, legal, everyone's over 18. We require full identifying details and 2 forms of government issued ID for every single participant, including who chose to have somebody else behind the camera. Even if we never see them, we have to know exactly who they are, 2 forms of government issued ID. And so it's not even possible to submit, let alone ever have published anything not fully consensual legal. But even when your video has passed all of the paperwork requirements, all the 2257 requirements, we train our curators when they're watching each video from beginning to end to ask themselves, as I watch this video, do I feel that the camera's in a position where everybody knows it's there? Do I have a bad feeling about this video? Because what we say is if you have a bad feeling, there's no need to rationalize it. Just having a bad feeling about this video is enough, we won't publish it. Nobody else goes 1/100th of the way towards the care and concern that we operate at Make Love Not Porn to keep our community safe.
I want to ask you, you've had this website for 11 years. That's a significant amount of time. I'm sure that you yourself have been involved in many curations and choosing and selecting videos. That's an education in and of itself. Okay, I am fully aware of that. That is a huge education. I want to ask you, what is one of the biggest lessons you have learned about human sexuality in your 11 years of seeing user-uploaded videos of real people having real sex?
First of all, you're absolutely right, because I designed Make Love Not Porn to be the Kinsey of today. Real world, real time, real life, human sexual behavior, capture and aggregate in a way that nobody else is doing, in an area that, as you know, is notoriously research and data free, because for all the reasons we battle on a daily basis to keep this business alive, nobody's funding the ComScore of sex and porn or any research and in an area of research where there is the widest possible gap between what people say and what people actually do. And we are all about what people actually do. So first of all, I've been saying for years that real world sex is more surprising, more creative, more innovative, and more hot and arousing than porn will ever be. And I have to tell you that after 11 years of being on the front lines of how the world has sex every single day, we have a weekly team meeting at Make Love Not Porn where our curation team reports on the past week, new Make Love Not Porn stars, number of videos, anything noteworthy in the videos. And to this day, we will go, wow, did not know that was a thing. We are still being surprised what people are getting up to out there in the real world. But what I will say is the biggest thing that has blown all of us away is because, I did not consciously consider all of this when I came up with this idea in the first place. We have discovered that as a unique business, Make Love Not Porn has a unique capability. We have the power to change people's sexual attitudes and behavior for the better in a way that nothing else can. So we hear from our community every single day in terms of how we change their lives. Over the past 11 years, we have taught countless young people, and people generally, by the way, that porn is not sex in the real world. We have saved numerous marriages and relationships. We've inspired countless communications breakthroughs amongst couples. We have helped people. So there are many things that you will only see on Make Love Not Porn you won't see anywhere else. Because we exist to showcase how we all have sex in the real world. I know this won't come as any surprise to you, but sometimes it does to listeners. One thing I didn't realize when I embarked on this venture was that I and my tiny team would fight an enormous battle every single day, not even to grow this business, just to keep it open. Basically, because every piece of business infrastructure any other tech startup takes for granted, we can't. The small print always says, as you know, no adult content. And that is all pervasive across every area of the business. I can't get funded, I can't get back, I can't put payments in place, I can't advertise, etc., etc. All of this is just to respond to your question by saying, we're tiny bootstrapping, we have no money. We have a website that has been pretty much static for 2 years because we have no funding and resources to update it and improve it. So at the moment, our search does not work well, and we have not been able to add new tags to what we search, as actually, interestingly, more menopausal Make Love Not Porn have joined us. So the answer is, one day, absolutely. I'm working to raise funding to be able to have my own CTO, my own in-house development team, to be able to build out the full vision of what this platform should be. But at the moment, we're not there.
Do the creators that are uploading, is there any incentive for them to upload, or are they?
Yeah, there is, but in a way, it's not a primary incentive. So I foresaw the creator economy 14 years ago when I designed Make Love Not Porn's revenue share business model in order to democratize access to income. So our members pay to subscribe, rent, and stream social sex videos. Half that income goes to our contributors, whom we call our Make Love Not Porn stars. And when we launched Make Love Not Porn 11 years ago, I introduced our business model with a blog post headlined, How Make Love Not Porn Can Help the Global Economy. And I began it by saying, you know those little scam ads that pop up on the internet all the time going, make $2,000 a week working from home? Well, now you can. And I laid out the fact that, the reason I designed this revenue share business model is because my background, I believe very strongly that everybody should realize the value of what they create. And I feel that especially strongly because career-wise, my background is theatre and advertising, two industries where ideas and creativity are massively undervalued even by the creators themselves. So I believe that when you create something that gives other people pleasure, a video, a piece of journalism, a book, you should see a financial return on it. And the more people you give more pleasure to, the greater that return should be. So in this blog post, I said, my vision is that one day, Make Love Not Porn hits the kind of critical mass where your Make Love Not Porn video gets 1 million rentals at $5 per rental, and we give you half that income. Now, we're a very long way away from that because of all lack of funding and all the battles I fight. But I'm happy to say that during the pandemic, our Make Love Not Porn stars, like everyone else, lost their jobs, couldn't find work. They told us that our monthly payouts were what kept them going. But the reason I say to you it's not the prime motivation is because, what is most important is that we're building a community around shared sexual values. So we get a number of Make Love Not Porn stars uploading videos without even realizing they can make money. They just believe, like we do, in a more open, healthy dialogue and attitudes around sex. And they want to be a part of what we call the social sex revolution. Here's what is and has always been my challenge trying to raise funding. I know that my investors are out there. There are a ton of them. And by the way, there are a ton of them in every single country in the world. They are impossible to find by the usual means because they all have one thing in common. Your willingness to fund Make Love Not Porn is entirely a function of your personal sexual journey. It's a function of your personal lens on sex and sexuality that's been shaped by your own experience of it. And I obviously have no way to research and target for that. Especially because sex is the area where you cannot tell from the outside what anybody thinks on the inside. The people who look like they would totally get it don't. The people who look like complete prudes do. And so my strategy has to be, I put what I'm doing out there all the time, across all my social channels. I do every media interview master, I go on every single podcast, because I have to make synaptic connections happen that will attract those investors to me. Now, this is theoretically a long, slow, painful, and highly inefficient process. In practice, it does actually work every so often. I've been frankly gobsmacked at the amount of incoming investor interest I get on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my #1 investor lead generator. Investors reach out of the blue and say, I see you're raising funding, I'd like to talk. I'm intrigued, tell me more. But that's what makes it so difficult. There are people out there who would absolutely fund every one of us, but they are not the obvious people. You can't target them like founders target VC funds. Oh, they invest in all these categories, because nobody's investing in sex, broadly speaking. You have to find a way to make those connections happen that bring those investors to you. And that's what makes it extraordinarily difficult.
People don't really want to do too much with anything in the adult industry because of really the stigma and judgment around it. They're scared that if they get too involved, that might hurt them.
But of course, the enormous irony is, as I've been saying for 14 years, we are talking about the single area of universal human experience we are all most engaged with, most fascinated by, and most fucked up about. Dollar signs all over that. So what I've been doing accordingly is doing my best to pave my and everybody else's way. Because when you have a truly world-changing startup, you have to change the world to fit it, not the other way around. And so that's why for the past 9 years, I've deliberately been defining, pioneering, and championing my own category, sex tech. So I literally wrote the definition of sex tech. If you Google sex tech, I'm result 1 on page 1. And sex tech is any form of technology or tech venture designed to innovate, disrupt, and enhance in any area of human sexuality and human sexual experience. I coined the hashtag sex tech. I didn't invent the term, by the way, but I'm directly responsible for propagating the hashtag as widely as it's used today. And I began speaking at tech conferences all around the world on why the next big thing in tech is sex tech. Because at base level, I thought, if I just say this loudly enough, often enough, in enough places, people start to believe it. And it's absolutely worked. I mean, I was only doing this to legitimize my own category, to create a climate of receptivity amongst investors for Make Love Not Porn. But over the years, sex tech has absolutely become a thing. And now when you Google sex tech, there are tons of articles and reports and, and so it is absolutely being recognized. But that's part of the fact that for 14 years, I've had to parallel path two things: working to build Make Love Not Porn and working to change the business and cultural context around it. The good news is that 14 years on, I do see the barriers falling. I do think we are at a zeitgeist moment, and I do think that with all of us pulling together to change this, we absolutely can.
What profession were you in prior to creating Make Love Not Porn?
My background is 38 years working in advertising, which I always say was very good preparation for what I do now, because I have spent 38 years working in the business of getting people to do things they originally had no intention of doing.
That's advertising.
Exactly.
I want to talk more about a little bit about some of the things that you've learned from building this business in these 14 years and what you've learned about not just the industry at large, but again, people. Is there anything that stands out to you as just one of the most interesting or shocking things that you've learned?
Honestly, I would say, the two key things I've learned are, first of all, everybody is dying to talk about sex, which is why it's so ridiculous that we don't. And the second thing is, what motivates me is every single day for the past 14 years, I have seen firsthand the enormous human misery and unhappiness caused by the shame, guilt, and embarrassment that we've imbued sex with. And that's absolutely what I'm out to solve. Make Love Not Porn is a shame changer. We take the shame, the guilt, and the embarrassment out of sex. And as I say, we have 11 years of proof of concept of how transformative it is when you do that. That's why We call ourselves the social sex revolution. The revolutionary part is not the sex, it's the fact we're finally making it social, because that's what needs to happen. And then I realized that, because of what I do, my life is shitty on a daily basis. I was not expecting that.
Your life is what?
My life is shitty on a daily basis because of what I do. It was very funny. I was being interviewed earlier this year for a series on leadership, and what the interviewers were trying to do was really get into the psychology of founders and leaders, and get their interview subjects to look deep within themselves. So one of the questions they asked me was, so Cindy, have you ever found that your ego got in the way of doing something was the right thing to do? And I just burst out laughing, and I said, oh my God, what ego? I am humiliated on a daily basis working on Make Love Not Porn. I left my ego behind a long time ago. When you are treated as a pariah every single day because of the business that you started, ego just doesn't even come into the equation. I am used to humiliation, abasement, being looked down on because of what I do. But yeah, I didn't expect that 14 years ago.
That's actually hard to hear. It's hurtful even for me to hear that human beings are treated poorly because of what they're trying to do. And obviously, being at Live Jasmin, I see this in the models too. I mean, some of these models have become millionaires from camming, and they have worked so hard, incredibly hard. And yet, if they go to the bank to buy a house with their tons of money, and the bank finds out that they're in the adult industry, they're going to have a hard time getting potentially the loan they need, or whatever the case is. To be shamed for what you do when you're not hurting anyone, and in fact, your intentions are to help, is such a crime against humanity. It really is. And that is one of the things that we want to change. But, it's usually lack of knowledge, and I hate to say it, but ignorance, that causes people to act that way. And so you can only have compassion for that. But that's why it's so important to have open conversations to get information out.
But that's also why it's so important I raise the funding I'm looking for, because as people I've talked to will tell you, it's been my goal for a very long time to buy a bank. And the reason I say that is because of two things. The first is that one of my two biggest business growth inhibitors at Make Love Not Porn is payments. PayPal won't work with us. Stripe won't work with us. Mainstream credit card processors won't work with us. We have to work with adult-friendly payment processors who, because anybody adult has nowhere else to go, charge extortionate fees. I pay out 12% of my revenue every month in payment processing fees alone, versus mainstream rates of 3% or less. That's a huge business growth inhibitor. So for years, I've talked publicly about the fact that I want to raise funding to build the infrastructure of sex tech, especially the Stripe of sex tech. Because the first payment processor that welcomes legal, ethical, transparent, adult, anybody, sex tech, anybody, cleans up. And in order to build the Stripe of sex tech, the challenge is not the technology is the easy part, the challenge is finding a bank to underwrite it. And so I want to buy a bank. And as my team at Make Love Not Porn will tell you, because I've said this regularly in our weekly meetings, I've said, when I buy that bank, which I'm determined to one day, if I can find the investors to get it, I'm going to open up that bank to every single sex worker who cannot open an account anywhere else. And fuck me, will prove how much revenue that generates.
When we were talking earlier and you mentioned that a man had left a comment on a video saying that this made him want to be a better man and person. I could tell that it was an emotional moment actually for you. I could sense that emotion in you. And I want to ask you, well, I have two questions. First, what are you the most proud of out of what you've done? And, this is a battle. This is a struggle. I know it's a struggle for you. I see even how much of a struggle it is on this side of things. What is it that motivates you to keep going and keep fighting?
Sure. So I get asked this a lot, you know. Two things motivate me. The first is, as I said, our community writes to us every day and tells us how we changed their lives. I know that I have a business, I have a platform that could change the entire world if I could only raise the kind of funding that is flung unthinkingly at white bro founders building utterly trivial food delivery apps. So that's the first thing that keeps me going. The second thing is, the thing that most motivates me is a dynamic that I characterize as I'm going to fucking well show you. You tell me it can't be done, I'm going to fucking well show you. You put an obstacle in our path, I'm going to fucking well show you. I take all of that daily demoralization and depression and discouragement and I turn it all into motivation and inspiration. That's how I keep going.
I'm a huge sports fan. I love basketball, and my favorite basketball player was and is Kobe Bryant. And that sounds a lot of like him. We call it the Mamba mentality, you know, where your detractors might be saying something about you, but you use that as fuel to get better. And I'm so inspired by people who have that ability. You know, Kobe said that the reason why he became such a profound and great basketball player was because of how mean people were to him at the start of his career. And that is what fueled him to turn everything around and to really make it. And I know I have personal stories of that of my own. And so I think that that's a beautiful thing to transmute that energy and use it for your success, like your stepping stone. Yeah.
Thank you.
And what would you say is something you're the most proud of so far in growing this?
Honestly, that Make Love Not Porn is still here. I've been staring down my financial runway for 11 years. I'm staring down it right now. I've always managed to pull it out of the hole. I put everything I have into Make Love Not Porn. I've destroyed myself financially for this business. I guess I'm proud of the fact it's still here.
You just really believe in it. I can tell. Yeah.
Yeah, but honestly, it's not. I believe in it because I see it works. You know, if I had come up with some idea that had no traction, nobody wanted, I was deluding myself about, I'd have no problem giving up. That is not the case with this business.
I can back that, yes, these types of dynamics, when done correctly, really are healing for people. I know that that is true. What do you believe is needed individually or collectively in order to move things forward in society into becoming a more sexually well society?
It's really simple. One word answer: money. The only thing holding me back from changing the world through sex is lack of access to capital. And I mean that in terms of all the things that all of us could do when investors fund the shit out of us as much as they do every other goddamn sector in tech. In order to try and get the tech and business worlds to open up their minds, for the past however many years, I've been saying publicly that the three biggest disruption opportunities in tech today are sex, cannabis, and the blockchain. And ironically, investors are flooding into the other two sectors, but not the first, which means that startups and VCs and investors in cannabis and the blockchain can afford to fund lobbyists, regulation change, public education initiatives, foundations. We need all of that in sex tech because we need a new legal definition of adult content. And so money is the key to changing all of this. You know, I mentioned earlier, I think I did, that my other business growth inhibitor is that at Make Love Not Porn, we are banned from advertising anywhere. We are not allowed to advertise on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, Reddit, I ask you, Google, YouTube, etc., etc. That's infuriating, by the way, because, for example, we are banned from doing Google search ads Yet every day, all around the world, people search for Make Love Not Porn without knowing that we exist. And what I mean by that is the top organic search terms that send traffic to us are make love, not porn, real sex, not porn, video sexo na porno, make love not porn, where they don't know there's a company actually called that. One young man told me that he found us when he Googled porn that is not porn. He was so fed up with everything out there. What is something different? No idea what to search for. When you fortuitously search porn that is not porn, you find make love not porn. That's how much the world wants us and knows that needs us. Well, all of those advertising barriers fall when I can write big enough checks. And that's why I'm working to raise a large round of funding at the moment, because, as I said, all we need is money, money to be able to scale our platforms, money for me to be able to buy a bank that we can all bank at, money to hire lobbyists, to update ludicrous legislation and drive a new legal definition of adult content. Money solves everything. That's the one thing we all need.
Even coming from Jasmin, where that is not so much the issue of Jasmin. When Jasmin can cut decent sized checks, there are a lot of people that aren't willing to take those checks because of the nature of the adult industry.
Well, in that case, you should be hiring me to partner with you to make all this shit happen. Because I have been able to take sex places it never normally gets to go. In 14 years, I've taken Make Love Not Porn to an unprecedented level of social and business acceptance. And by the way, that is the second part of the answer to your question. Because, I've been interviewed countless times in the past 14 years. The same questions come up again and again. One of which is, so Cindy, why do you think we're all so repressed about sex?
Yes.
And I'm asked this question so often, I now have my answer down pat. 3 reasons. Reason number one, centuries of repression, religion, socio-cultural dynamics in every single country in the world. This is a global issue that we're talking about. Reason number 2, the patriarchy. Because historically, every institution, including government and religion, has been male-dominated. We as women have never been allowed to bring our lens to bear on human sexuality, and the world is a poorer place for it. And reason number 3, very straightforwardly, is there are not enough people like me. And what I mean by that is, and I know you know this, but I have to say this to the interviewer, the world makes it fucking difficult to innovate and disrupt social narratives around sex. Many people have tried and given up, and I don't blame them, because as I said, my life is shitty on a daily basis because of what I do. We need many more people like me who will not give up no matter what.
I can definitely feel your passion and enthusiasm. Thank you so much.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes, thank you.